I wasn't supposed to find out like this. Not from a flight confirmation buried in a deleted folder. Not from a luxury resort booking that had my husband's name on it, but not mine. It was Santorini. Private villa. Infinity pool. 7 nights. 4 guests. Alex Carter. Monica Carter. Kayla Carter. And a 4th name I had never seen before. Vanessa Hale. I remember staring at the screen. Blinking like that would somehow change what I was looking at. Like maybe my name would appear if I refreshed the page. Or if I scrolled down far enough. But it didn't. There was no second reservation. No late addition. No explanation. Just them. A complete family trip without me. That was the moment something cold settled in my chest. Because this wasn't a mistake. My husband didn't forget me. He replaced me. And whatever this trip was, whatever story they were living out there under the Greek sun, I was no longer part of it. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was that by the time their plane took off, I had already found everything. And I wasn't going to cry. I was going to wait. I sat there for a long time after that. The office was quiet. The soft hum of the air conditioner the only sound in the room. My laptop screen dimmed. Then brightened again when I moved the mouse. But I didn't close the file. I opened everything. That's what I do. I don't react, I analyze. I've spent the last 8 years walking into broken companies, identifying what's wrong, and fixing it before anyone else even realizes there's a problem. I don't panic. I don't guess. I find patterns, and right now, there was a pattern sitting right in front of me. Flights booked 3 weeks ago. First class. Paid in full. The villa reservation made 2 days later. Same dates. Same group. No changes. No cancellations. No hesitation. This wasn't a last-minute decision. This was planned. Structured. Executed. Which meant one thing. They didn't just decide to leave me out. They had already built something without me. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers still resting on the keyboard, and forced myself to breathe slowly. Think, who was Vanessa? The name didn't ring any immediate bells, but something about it felt familiar in the worst possible way. Like a word on the tip of your tongue that you know matters, you just don't know why yet. I typed it into the search bar. Nothing obvious at first. A few social profiles. A LinkedIn account. A professional headshot. Clean. Controlled. Intentional. Medical administrator? Based in Illinois. I stared at the location for a second longer than I needed to. Illinois. The same state Alex had suddenly started traveling to for client meetings over the past year. My grip on the mouse tightened. No. That didn't mean anything. Not yet. But my brain was already connecting the dots. The trips. The late nights. The emergency calls that pulled him out of the house right after dinner. I had accepted all of it without question. Because that's what you do when you trust someone. You fill in the gaps with good intentions. You explain things for them. You make it make sense. Until one day, it doesn't. I clicked into the booking details again, scanning every line like I was reviewing a contract worth millions. Check-in time. Room layout. Special requests. There it was. Anniversary arrangement requested. Private dinner for 2? My heart didn't break. It didn't even crack. It just hardened. Because that wasn't confusion anymore. That was confirmation. This wasn't just a trip. This was a life. A version of his life that didn't include me. I closed my eyes for a moment, pressing my fingers against my temples. If they could plan something like this openly, this confidently, then this wasn't the beginning. It was the middle, which meant there was a beginning I had missed, and probably an ending already written. I opened my eyes and stared back at the screen. No anger. Not yet. Anger clouds judgment. And right now, I needed clarity. I needed to understand how deep this went. Because if Alex could remove me from something this big without hesitation, what else had he already taken? I thought back to the past few months. The small things I ignored. The moments that didn't quite feel right but weren't strong enough to question. The way Monica had started treating me like I was a guest in my own home. The way Kayla would pause mid-sentence when I walked into a room, then smile like nothing had happened. The way Alex stopped asking me about my day. Stopped looking at me like I mattered. I had told myself it was stress. Work. Life. Marriage. I had told myself a lot of things. Because the alternative didn't make sense. Until now. Now it made perfect sense. I wasn't drifting away from them. They were phasing me out. Carefully. Quietly. Deliberately. And I let it happen. I sat up straighter. Pulling my laptop closer. No more assumptions. No more explanations. Just facts. I opened the deleted folder again and started digging deeper. Emails synced across devices. Old attachments. Calendar entries that had been removed but not erased. People think deleting something makes it disappear. It doesn't. It just hides it. And I've never been afraid to look where I'm not supposed to. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. This wasn't a secret relationship.
It was structured.
Repeated. Consistent. Same cities. Same dates. Same hotels. This wasn't random. This was routine. I leaned back again. Slower this time. He didn't just lie. He built a second life. And somehow, I had been living right next to it without ever seeing it. A strange calm settled over me. Not the kind that comes from peace. The kind that comes from certainty. Because once you understand the truth, you stop hesitating. And I understood something very clearly now. They weren't trying to fix anything. They were replacing me. Which meant I had a choice. I could confront him. Demand answers. Break down. Or I could wait. Watch. And learn everything they thought I would never see. I reached over and locked my screen. The room fell quiet again. But this time, it felt different. He thought I didn't know. That was his biggest mistake. Because I wasn't going to ask him what was going on. I was going to find out. And when I did, I wasn't going to be the one who lost anything. From the outside, my life looked perfect. That's what everyone used to say. I had the kind of career people respected. I walked into boardrooms where decisions were made, where numbers mattered more than emotions. And I always knew exactly what to say. I built strategies for companies that were falling apart and turned them into something profitable again. I was good at what I did, sharp, composed, controlled, and at home. It looked just as polished. A beautiful house in a quiet Chicago neighborhood. Clean lines, expensive furniture, everything in its place. The kind of home people complimented the moment they stepped inside. And Alex, he was the kind of husband people admired without even trying. Calm, stable, reliable. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make scenes, didn't draw attention to himself. At dinner parties, he was the one people gravitated toward. Easy to talk to, easy to trust. For a long time, I believed that version of him too. I believed I had chosen well, that I had built something solid, that I had won. But sitting there in my office, staring at that reservation with someone else's name next to his, I started to understand something uncomfortable. Perfection isn't always real. Sometimes it's just consistent. Consistently quiet. Consistently controlled. Consistently hiding something you don't question, because you don't have a reason to, or at least, you think you don't. I leaned back in my chair, letting my mind move through the past few years. Not emotionally, but analytically, like reviewing a case file I had ignored for too long. I started with myself. I've always been the kind of person who solves problems. I see patterns where other people see chaos. I break things down, step by step, until they make sense. But I never did that with my marriage. With Alex, I trusted. And trust, I was starting to realize, is just a blind spot you choose to protect. Because if I had looked closer, if I had treated my own life the way I treated my clients' businesses, I would have seen it. The signs weren't hidden. They were just small, subtle, easy to explain away. Alex hadn't changed overnight. That would have been obvious. No, he changed slowly. quietly. The late nights started first. Then the work trips. Then the small things, like checking his phone more often. Stepping outside to take calls. Turning his screen away without even thinking about it. At the time, it all made sense. He was busy, successful, in demand. That's what I told myself. That's what I wanted to believe. I closed my eyes for a moment, remembering the way people used to talk about him. You're lucky. They'd say, he's a good man. And maybe he was. At least, that's the version he showed them. Because behind that version, there was something else forming. Something I didn't see because I never thought to look. And I wasn't the only one shaping that reality. Monica had always been there. Always watching. Always present. Even when she wasn't physically in the room. She had this way of speaking that never sounded aggressive, but somehow left you feeling smaller by the end of it. Little comments. Little corrections. Little reminders of what she thought things should be. She's very focused on work, she would say about me, smiling politely to whoever was listening. Not everyone knows how to balance priorities. It sounded harmless. Until you heard it enough times. Until you realized it wasn't a comment. It was a narrative. And Kayla didn't even pretend. She studied people for a living. Human resources. Policies. Behavior. Documentation. She knew exactly how to frame things. With her, it wasn't passive. It was direct. You should really think about how you come across, she told me once. Casually. Like she was doing me a favor. Not everyone responds well to intensity. Intensity. That's what she called it. Not intelligence. Not confidence. Something that needed to be softened. Adjusted. Managed. At the time, I brushed it off. Because why would I take advice from someone who had never built anything I respected? But now, thinking back, she wasn't giving advice. She was observing, cataloging, learning. I opened my eyes and stared at the screen again. But I wasn't looking at the reservation anymore. I was looking at everything that led up to it. The conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. The looks exchanged over my shoulder. The decisions made without me. Then presented like they were already final. I used to think it was just family dynamics. Different personalities. Normal tension. But it wasn't. It was consistency. And consistency means intention. They weren't reacting to me. They were shaping something around me. Something I wasn't meant to be part of. I exhaled slowly, my fingers resting lightly against the edge of the desk. There was another layer, too. One I had ignored because it felt too small to matter. Money. Not the big things. The small ones. The shifts. The gradual changes in how things were handled. Alex started taking over more of the financial decisions. It's easier this way, he told me once. You're busy. Let me handle it. And I let him. Because it made sense. Because I trusted him. Because I didn't think there was anything to question. But now I remembered the notifications. The account alerts I dismissed. The transactions I didn't double-check. The way access slowly shifted from shared to controlled without ever being discussed directly. I had handed him control without realizing what that meant. And in my world, control is everything. I opened my eyes fully now, sitting up straighter. There was one memory that stood out more than the others. A dinner charge. Expensive. A place I had never been to. I asked him about it. He didn't hesitate. Client meeting, he said. And I believed him. No follow-up? No questions. No doubt. That was the moment. Not because it was the first lie, but because it was the first one I noticed. And I chose not to see it. I leaned back again, staring at the ceiling this time. It wasn't sudden. None of this was. It was built, step by step, layer by layer, until one day, you wake up and realize you're no longer part of the structure you helped create. I lowered my gaze slowly. Back to the screen. The trip. Vanessa. The plan. It wasn't the beginning. It was the result. They didn't start replacing me last week. They started the moment I stopped questioning them. Vanessa Hale. I said her name out loud once, just to hear how it sounded in the room. It didn't belong there. It didn't belong in my life, in my marriage, in anything that had my name attached to it. And yet, somehow, it was already everywhere. I pulled my laptop closer and typed her name into every search field I could think of. Social media first, then professional databases, then public records. I didn't rush it. I never do. Information tells you more when you let it unfold. Her profile came up clean. Too clean. Professional photo. Controlled smile. Neutral background. The kind of image someone uses when they understand perception matters. Medical administrator. Based in Illinois. I stared at the location again. Illinois. The same state Alex had been traveling to more frequently over the past year. I clicked into her work history. Scanning dates. Positions. Locations. Everything lined up neatly. No gaps. No inconsistencies. Which was exactly what made it suspicious. People who have nothing to hide don't polish their lives this carefully. I leaned back slightly, letting the information settle. If she wasn't connected to me, then she was connected to him. There was no other explanation. I opened my calendar and started pulling up Alex's past travel dates. One by one. Month after month. Client meetings. Site visits. Consultations. All the reasons he had given me without hesitation. I cross-referenced them with what I was seeing now. Cities. Dates. Durations. It didn't take long. They matched. Not perfectly, never perfectly. That would have been careless. But close enough. Close enough that if you were looking, you'd see it. And if you weren't, you'd miss it completely. I felt something shift inside me then. Not shock. Not even anger. Recognition. He didn't lie randomly. He repeated the same lie until it became normal. I opened the email cache again, digging deeper into threads that had been partially deleted but not fully erased. Fragments of conversations. Subject lines. Attachments that still existed even when the message body was gone. That's where I found it. A sentence. Short. Casual. Easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. My eyes stayed on the screen. Reading it again. Slower this time. We... Not I. Not you. We... This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment. It wasn't something that got out of hand. It was intentional. Sustained. Real. I scrolled further. My fingers steady. My breathing even. Photos. Not many, but enough. A dinner table. 2 glasses of wine. A view I recognized from a hotel chain Alex had stayed at before. And then one more message. Once everything is finalized, we won't have to pretend anymore. Finalized. I sat very still at that word. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about transition. Replacement. A shift from one life to another. And I wasn't part of the second one. I swallowed slowly, forcing myself to stay focused. Emotion could come later. Right now, I needed clarity. I searched for my own name in the threads. It didn't take long to find it. And when I did, everything inside me went quiet. She doesn't suspect anything. I read the line once. Then again. No hesitation. No guilt. Just certainty. Vanessa knew I existed. And not only that, she knew exactly where I stood. Outside. Irrelevant. Temporary. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling for a moment, letting that settle. This wasn't a secret relationship. Secrets imply risk, fear, uncertainty. There was none of that here. This was coordinated, structured, accepted. I lowered my gaze back to the screen and kept going. That's when I saw something I hadn't expected. Another name in the thread. Monica. Followed by another. Kayla. My fingers paused on the keyboard. No. I clicked into the thread. Read it carefully, line by line. And there it was. Casual. Almost routine. Monica asking about travel details. Kayla suggesting scheduling adjustments. Vanessa responding like she belonged. Like this wasn't new. Like this had already been discussed. I felt my jaw tighten. But I didn't look away. They didn't just know. They were involved. Not reacting. Not questioning. Participating. Choosing. I exhaled slowly, the air leaving my lungs in a controlled stream. They didn't just accept her. They chose her. Over me. I sat there for a long moment, letting the full picture come together. The trips. The distance. The comments. The financial shifts. The conversations that stopped when I entered the room. It wasn't random. It wasn't emotional. It was systematic. I wasn't being pushed out slowly. I was already gone. They just hadn't told me yet. I closed the email window carefully, not out of hesitation, but because I didn't need to see it anymore. I understood. Fully. Completely. There was no confusion left. Only one question remained. If they were bold enough to travel together, to plan openly, to speak about a future that didn't include me, then what had they already prepared for when they came back? I sat back in my chair, my hands resting still in my lap. The answer wasn't in what they had done. It was in what they were about to do. And I was done being the only one who didn't know. The file wasn't even hidden that well. Post-trip plan. PDF. It sat there like it didn't matter. Like it was just another attachment in a long chain of emails. If I hadn't been looking carefully, if I had still been the version of myself who trusted without question, I might have ignored it. But I wasn't that version anymore. I clicked it open. The first page loaded slowly, and for a moment, I just stared at the title. No names, no emotions, no hesitation. Just structure, timeline, actions, outcomes. I felt something shift in my chest again, not shock, not disbelief. Recognition. This wasn't a conversation. This was a plan. I scrolled down. Phase 1. Maintain current conditions until travel is complete. Maintain current conditions. That meant me. Unaware. Passive. Present. A variable they had already accounted for. I kept reading. Phase 2. Initiate separation process immediately upon return. Separation. Not discussion. Not consideration. Process. Legal. Structured. Controlled. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes moving faster now. They had already decided. The marriage wasn't breaking. It was being executed. My name appeared further down, but not in the way I expected. Subject exhibits signs of emotional instability under stress. I stopped. Read it again. Carefully. Emotionally unstable. Under stress. There were notes attached. Examples. Fabricated incidents. Arguments I didn't remember. Reactions I never had. They weren't describing me. They were writing a version of me. One that would be easy to discredit. Easy to dismiss. Easy to remove. I scrolled further. Supporting documentation to be prepared in advance. Prepared. Not collected. Not observed. Created. My fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the desk. This wasn't about perception. This was about construction. They were building a case against me. I kept reading. Recommendation. Psychological evaluation to establish baseline. I exhaled slowly through my nose. This was worse than I expected. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to redefine me. Make me unreliable. Make me unstable. Make me someone no one would believe. My gaze dropped to the next section. Asset restructuring to be completed prior to filing. Finally. The part that mattered most. Numbers. Accounts. Movements. This was where the truth always lived. I scanned the details quickly. Transfers. Reallocations. Accounts I recognized, and some I didn't. Smaller transactions. Spread out over time. Invisible if you weren't paying attention. But Now I was. One line stood out. Primary funds to be secured externally. Externally. Offshore. My mind moved through the implications instantly. He hadn't just prepared to leave. He had prepared to leave with everything. I leaned back in my chair. letting the information settle into place. This wasn't emotional. It wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. Every step thought through. Every outcome anticipated. Except one. Me knowing. I scrolled back up. Slower this time. Looking not just at the plan, but at how it was written. The tone. The structure. The language. And that's when I saw it. Certain sections didn't match. Different phrasing. Different rhythm. More precise. More calculated. I knew that tone. I had heard it before. Monica. This wasn't just Alex making decisions. He wasn't leading this. He was following it. She had written parts of this. I could see it clearly now. The way risks were outlined. The way outcomes were framed. This wasn't emotional manipulation. It was strategic elimination. She didn't hate me. Hate is messy. Unpredictable. This was clean. Controlled. Final. I continued reading, my eyes moving to the next section. And that's where Vanessa appeared again. Not in the background. Not as an afterthought. Integrated. Post-separation transition to include updated residential arrangements. Updated residential arrangements. I didn't need to read between the lines. She wasn't waiting for the marriage to end. She was already stepping into it. This wasn't an affair. It was a replacement plan. A handover. My position removed. Hers inserted. Seamlessly. I sat there, completely still. No anger. No panic. Just clarity. Every piece was in front of me now. The trip. The affair. The financial shifts. The behavior changes. The isolation. It all connected. Not randomly. Not emotionally. Strategically. They had been planning this for months. Maybe longer. And I had been living inside it without seeing it. I scrolled to the final section. Execution to be completed within 14 days of return. 14 days. That was how long they thought it would take to erase me. I closed the document slowly, my finger hovering over the trackpad for a moment before I let my hand fall back to my side. The room was silent again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt defined. I knew exactly where I stood. Not as a wife. Not as a partner. As a target. A problem they had already solved on paper. I stood up from my chair and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. Cars moving. People walking. Everything continuing like nothing had changed. But everything had, because now I understood something they didn't. Every plan has a weakness. No matter how detailed. No matter how controlled. No matter how carefully it's built. There's always something the person who made it didn't account for. And in this case, that something was me. I turned back toward my desk, my gaze settling on the laptop again. They thought they were planning my exit. They thought they were controlling the outcome. They thought I was still the version of myself who wouldn't question anything. They were wrong, because they had just given me something they would never be able to take back. Their blueprint. And now, I knew exactly how to break it. I didn't confront him. That was the first real decision I made. Not because I was afraid. Not because I didn't have enough proof. But because I understood something they clearly didn't. The moment I showed my hand, I would lose my advantage. So I said nothing. I went home that evening like I always did. Same routine. Same tone. Same version of myself they were used to seeing. Alex was in the kitchen when I walked in, leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone like nothing in the world had changed. "Hey," he said, glancing up briefly. "You're late." "Traffic." That's what I told him. A simple answer. Easy. Unremarkable. He nodded, already looking back at his screen. If there was any guilt in him, it didn't show. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the lies. Not the distance. The comfort. He was comfortable. Because in his version of reality, I didn't know anything. And I intended to keep it that way. I moved through the evening carefully, observing more than speaking. Every word he said. Every movement. Every glance filed away. Analyzed. Stored. When he talked about the upcoming trip, he didn't hesitate. It's just a quick break, he said. Needed to get out for a few days. A few days. That's how he described a 7-day luxury trip to Greece with another woman. I nodded like it made sense. Because that's what he expected. Because that's what they all expected. Monica called later that night. I could hear her voice faintly through the phone from across the room. Calm? Controlled. The same tone she always used when she thought she was managing something. She doesn't suspect anything, she said. Not to me. To him, I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew. I turned away quietly, giving them their illusion of privacy, letting them believe they were still ahead. That was the second decision I made. Let them feel safe. The next morning, I drove him to the airport. I offered, that was important. Because control isn't just about what you do. It's about what you choose to appear like. The drive was quiet. He filled it with small talk, work, weather, meaningless details that didn't require real engagement. I responded when necessary. Nothing more. Nothing less. When we pulled up to the terminal, Monica and Kayla were already there. Monica stood with perfect posture. Sunglasses on, her expression unreadable. Kayla leaned against a suitcase, scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging me when I stepped out of the car. They didn't look surprised to see me. They looked indifferent, like I didn't matter enough to react to. And then I saw her, Vanessa. She stood slightly apart from them, not fully inside the circle, but close enough to belong. She wasn't trying to hide. Not really. Her posture was relaxed, confident, like she had already stepped into a role she expected to keep. Alex walked over to her without hesitation. Not dramatically, not openly, but enough. A glance, a shift in distance, a familiarity that didn't need to be explained. That was all I needed. They weren't even pretending anymore. Not here. Not now. I stood there for a moment, watching them. 4 people. A complete unit. A structure that no longer included me. And for the first time, I didn't feel confused. I felt certain. They had already moved on. They were just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. Take care of the house, Alex said, turning back to me briefly. The house? Not our home. The wording didn't slip. It revealed. I nodded. Of course. That was all I gave him. No questions. No hesitation. No emotion. He studied my face for a second, like he was trying to read something that wasn't there. Then he turned away. And just like that, they were gone. I stood there until they disappeared into the terminal, until the space they occupied felt empty again. Only then did I let myself breathe. Really breathe. Not out of relief, out of clarity. That was the last moment I allowed myself to feel anything close to vulnerability. Because from this point forward, everything had to be intentional. I got back into the car and sat there for a minute, my hands resting on the steering wheel, my mind already moving ahead. No confrontation, no warning, no mistakes. If they had built a plan over months, I would build mine faster. And better. I drove home in silence. The house felt different when I walked in. Not empty. Not lonely. Defined. Like the lines had finally been drawn clearly enough for me to see where I stood. I went straight to my office and opened my laptop. No hesitation. No delay. The first email I sent was short. Direct. To a lawyer I trusted. I need a confidential consultation. Urgent. I didn't explain. Not yet. The second thing I did was secure my data. Files copied. Accounts reviewed. Access points identified. Everything that belonged to me, separated. Protected. Untouchable. They thought they were preparing to remove me. What they didn't realize was, they had already given me the time to prepare first. By the time their plane took off, I wasn't waiting anymore. I was building quietly, carefully, completely. Because you don't start a war by making noise. You start it by making sure the other side doesn't even know it's begun. And by the time they came back, it wouldn't be their plan anymore. It would be mine. The house was quiet when I woke up. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful. The kind that feels controlled. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, coffee untouched, staring at nothing in particular while my mind moved ahead of me. There was no hesitation left. No uncertainty. Day 1. This was where it actually began. Not the discovery. Not the realization. Execution. I walked into my office, closed the door behind me, and sat down in front of my laptop. No distractions. No interruptions. Just numbers. Systems. Access. Control. If they had built their plan around money, that's where I would start. I logged into our joint accounts first. Checking. Savings. Investment portfolios. Everything looked normal at a glance. Balances intact. Transactions routine. But I wasn't looking for normal. I was looking for patterns. I scrolled through months of activity, slowing down at points that didn't immediately make sense. Small transfers. Repeated amounts. Accounts I recognized and some I didn't. It was subtle. Deliberate. Nothing large enough to trigger alerts. Nothing obvious enough to question. But together, it told a story. He hadn't taken everything at once. He had been moving it slowly, carefully, making sure I wouldn't notice. I leaned forward slightly, my fingers moving faster now, cross-referencing transactions with dates, locations, and accounts. There it was, a chain. Money moving from one account to another, then another, until it disappeared into something external, something not directly tied to either of us. Offshore. I sat back, exhaling slowly. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to leave me with nothing. I picked up my phone and called the bank. My voice was calm, controlled, professional. I explained there had been irregularities, unrecognized transfers. I didn't speculate. I stated facts. That was enough. They flagged the account, put temporary holds on large outgoing transactions, added an extra layer of verification. It wasn't permanent, but it didn't need to be. It was a disruption. And right now, disruption was power. I hung up and stared at the screen again. I didn't take his money. I made sure he couldn't take mine. That was the difference. I shifted to the next layer. My business accounts. This was where things got more interesting, because unlike the personal accounts, this was my territory. My name, my work, my structure, or at least it used to be. I opened the transaction history and immediately noticed something off. Delayed payments, rerouted invoices, clients marked as pending when they should have been cleared. My eyes narrowed slightly as I dug deeper. Emails, contracts, payment instructions. Some of them had been altered, not drastically, just enough to redirect flow, to create gaps, to move money without raising suspicion. I felt something cold settle in my chest again. He hadn't just used our shared finances. He had used my business, turned it into a funnel, an asset, a resource to extract from. This wasn't betrayal. This was exploitation. I opened my contact list and started making calls. Short, direct, efficient. Clients I trusted. People who respected me. I need all future payments redirected to my primary account. Effective immediately. No explanations. No justifications. They didn't question it. They didn't need to. By the time I finished, the structure was already shifting back into place. Control returning. Layer by layer. I logged back into the system and updated access permissions. Removed his entry points. Changed passwords. Locked down everything that mattered. If he wanted control, he should have built something of his own. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence settle around me again. No anger. No satisfaction. Just progress. This wasn't revenge yet. This was preparation. My phone buzzed on the desk. A message. From Alex. Everything okay? I stared at it for a second longer than necessary. Simple, casual. But there was something underneath it. A shift. He felt something. Not enough to understand, but enough to notice. The system was changing, and even from thousands of miles away. He could sense it. I picked up the phone and typed a response. "Everything's fine. Enjoy your trip." I hit send. No hesitation. No emotion. Just enough to keep him comfortable. Because the moment he got uncomfortable, he would start looking. And I wasn't done yet. I placed the phone back down and looked at the screen again. Time. That was the only variable I couldn't fully control. The moment he realized the accounts were restricted, the moment he tried to move something and couldn't, everything would accelerate, which meant I had to move faster. I checked the timestamps again. Their flight, their arrival, their return. Days, not weeks. Days. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city again. Everything still moving. Unaware. Unchanged. Except for me. Except for what was already happening beneath the surface. I turned back toward the desk slowly, my mind already moving ahead to the next step. Evidence. Legal structure. Full exposure. But for now, this was enough. For the first time since I opened that file, I had control. Real control. Not assumed. Not shared. Mine. I glanced at the financial dashboard one more time. Access secured. Transfers blocked. Flow redirected. Clean. Precise. Complete. They left thinking they had everything. That they were ahead. That I was still the same person they had already planned to remove. But by the end of the first day, they had already lost the one thing they didn't even realize mattered most. Control. I woke up before my alarm. Not because I was restless. Because I was ready. Day 2. Yesterday was about control. Today was about proof. I walked straight into my office, closed the door, and powered up my laptop. No coffee. No distractions. Just focus. If I was going to destroy everything they built, I needed evidence that couldn't be denied. I started with what I already had access to. Email backups. Cloud storage. Shared folders Alex had stopped thinking about years ago. People don't hide things perfectly. They just assume you won't look. I looked everywhere. Old archives. Synced devices. Deleted folders that weren't really deleted. And slowly, piece by piece, it started to come together. The messages were still there. Not all of them. Enough of them. Fragments at first. Then threads. Then entire conversations that had been buried but never erased. Alex and Vanessa. No filters. No caution. No hesitation. Photos. Messages. Plans. This wasn't something recent. This wasn't something accidental. It had been going on for a long time. Long enough to become normal. Long enough to become routine. I stared at one message longer than the others. Last time felt too short. We need more time after everything is done. After everything is done. I leaned back slowly, letting that sink in. They weren't hiding anymore. They were waiting. Waiting for a transition. Waiting for a point where they wouldn't need to pretend. I scrolled further. More messages. More confirmations. And then something that shifted everything again. My name. She still doesn't suspect anything. I read it once. Then again. Still. Nothing. No hesitation. No guilt. Vanessa knew exactly who I was. And she didn't care. This wasn't a secret. It was a replacement. I closed my eyes for a brief second. Then opened them again. Focus. Emotion later. Evidence now. I moved on. Deeper searches. Background checks. Anything that connected her to something beyond him. It didn't take long. Her profile wasn't as clean as it looked. On the surface, everything was controlled. But underneath, there were traces. A previous position that ended abruptly. A reference to an internal audit. No public record of wrongdoing. But enough to raise questions. Enough to suggest a pattern. She didn't fall into this. She fit into it. I shifted my attention back to the financial records, cross-referencing what I had found with what I saw yesterday. And then it clicked. The structure, the movement, the precision. This wasn't just Alex. He didn't have the discipline for something this clean. Someone else helped him. Vanessa. Her access. Her knowledge. Systems. Processes. She wasn't just part of the relationship. She was part of the operation. I exhaled slowly, my fingers still moving across the keyboard. This wasn't betrayal anymore. This was collaboration. I moved to the next layer. Audio. Call logs. Voicemails. Anything synced across shared devices. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Conversations. Not between Alex and Vanessa. Between Monica and Kayla. Casual. Calculated. Unfiltered. She's too independent. That's the problem. That's why we need documentation. We need to show a pattern, not just one incident. I sat completely still as the audio played. They weren't guessing. They weren't reacting. They were building, step by step, a narrative about me. Kayla's voice came through clearly. If we position it as behavioral inconsistency, it's easier to support long-term behavioral inconsistency. I almost smiled. HR language. Precise, clinical, effective. She wasn't criticizing me. She was studying me, turning me into a case, a file, something that could be documented and dismissed. I paused the audio and leaned back in my chair. They didn't whisper about me. They analyzed me. Every reaction, every moment, every detail. Stored, structured, prepared. I reopened the document files and started scanning through everything again. That's when I found it. A file with my name on it. My signature. My authorization. I stared at it for a second, then opened it. It didn't take long to see the problem. I never signed it. The formatting was correct. The structure was clean. But it wasn't mine. It was close enough to pass, but not close enough to fool me. I felt something shift again. This wasn't manipulation anymore. This was fraud. Clear. Direct. Illegal. I sat there for a long moment, letting that reality settle in. They didn't just plan to remove me. They were willing to break the law to do it. And they assumed I would never find out. I looked back at everything I had gathered. Emails. Financial records. Audio. Forged documents. It was all there. Not scattered. Not incomplete. A full picture. A complete structure. I started organizing it. Folders. Categories. Timelines. Building it the way I would build any case. Clean. Logical. Unavoidable. If they wanted a case against me, I would build one against all of them. Hours passed without me noticing. The light outside shifted. The room grew quieter. But I didn't stop. Not until everything was in place. Not until there were no gaps left. Not until I understood every move they had made. When I finally leaned back in my chair, it wasn't from exhaustion. It was from certainty. I knew everything. The affair. The money. The manipulation. The plan. There was nothing left hidden. Nothing left unclear. I looked at the screen one last time, then closed the laptop slowly. They thought they were writing my ending, that they were controlling the outcome, that I was still the version of myself who wouldn't question anything. But they had made one mistake. They left the evidence behind. And now, I had everything I needed to rewrite their ending instead. I didn't wake up with doubt anymore. By the time day 3 began, everything was already decided. There was nothing left to discover, only something to build. I walked into my office and sat down, opening my laptop with the same calm precision I had carried since the moment I found the truth. The evidence was already there, organized, categorized, complete. Now it needed structure, not just proof. A case. Because evidence alone doesn't win. The story you build with it does. I created a new folder and started assembling everything into a narrative. Not emotional. Not reactive. Strategic. Financial fraud. Affair timeline. Family involvement. Forged documents. Each piece connected. Not randomly, but deliberately. Every action they had taken, every decision they had made, It all fit into something bigger, something undeniable. I didn't need to exaggerate. The truth was enough. I leaned forward, scanning through the compiled files, adjusting the order, refining the flow. If this ever went to court, it wouldn't be chaos. It would be clarity. And clarity wins. I paused for a moment, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. There were options. I could press criminal charges. Fraud alone would be enough. The forged documents would hold. The offshore transfers would raise flags. I could take everything to court and let the system dismantle them piece by piece. But that wasn't the only path. Divorce. Civil exposure. Financial recovery. Faster. Cleaner. Controlled. I closed my eyes briefly, weighing the outcomes. This wasn't about destruction. It was about outcome. Control. And the best way to control an outcome is to give the other side no winning move. I opened a new document. Terms. Clear. Direct. Non-negotiable. If they fought, they would lose everything. Legally. Financially. Reputationally. If they complied, they would walk away with less damage but still lose. Either way, I would win. I picked up my phone and made a call. Not emotional. Not rushed. Calculated. A corporate lawyer I had worked with years ago. Someone who understood structure. Pressure. Leverage. He answered quickly. Allison, I need you to review something. Confidential. No hesitation. No problem. I sent the files. Not all of them. Just enough. Enough to show the structure. Enough to confirm what I already knew. I waited. Not anxiously. Just still. When he called back, his tone had changed. This is solid, he said. If everything here holds, they're exposed on multiple levels. I know. A brief pause. You want to go aggressive. I looked at the screen in front of me. The documents. The plan. Their plan. No, I said quietly. I want control. Another pause. Then a soft exhale on the other end. Understood. That was all I needed. Confirmation. Not direction. I ended the call and turned back to my laptop. They had built a plan to remove me. I was about to use it against them. I opened their original document again. The timeline, the sequence, the structure. I mirrored it, adjusted it, improved it. Where they planned to act, I would act first. Where they expected weakness, I would show control. Where they assumed silence, I would deliver consequence. I started drafting the final documents. Divorce filings, asset claims, legal notices. Everything pre-filled. Every detail aligned with the evidence. All that would be left was a signature. I printed them out and placed them neatly on the desk. Order matters. Presentation matters, even in moments like this. Especially in moments like this. I stood up and walked through the house slowly. Every room, every space, seeing it differently now. Not as something shared, but as something reclaimed. I stopped at the front door and replaced the lock. Simple. Clean. Final. Then I moved to the security system. Activated cameras. Visible. Obvious. Not hidden. This wasn't about watching them. It was about letting them know they were being watched. Control isn't always silent. Sometimes it's visible. I stepped back into the living room and looked around. Everything was ready. Every variable accounted for. Every outcome prepared. My phone buzzed. Flight update. They had changed their return. Earlier, I checked the time again. Less time than expected. I didn't react. Plans don't fail because they're imperfect. They fail because people panic. I don't panic. I moved faster. Final checks. Accounts secured. Evidence backed up in multiple locations. Legal documents ready? Nothing left exposed. Nothing left vulnerable. I stood in the center of the house. The silence settling around me again. Not empty. Not uncertain. Loaded. They thought they were coming home. Back to something familiar. Something controlled. Something predictable. But they weren't. They were walking into something entirely different. Something they didn't understand. Something they couldn't stop. I looked toward the front door, my reflection faintly visible in the glass. No hesitation. No doubt. Just certainty. They thought they were coming back to take everything from me. But by the time they stepped inside, there would be nothing left for them to take. Only consequences waiting. The notification came through while I was standing in the living room. Flight landed. Earlier than scheduled. I glanced at the time. Then at the door. So this was it. No more preparation. No more adjustments. Just execution. I walked back into my office and did one final check. Documents aligned. Evidence secured. Backups confirmed. Every system I had put in place was still holding. There was nothing left to fix. Only to let it unfold. I stepped out into the hallway and paused for a moment. Listening. The house was still. But not for long. I adjusted the lighting slightly, not brighter. Not darker. Just enough to make the space feel intentional. Controlled. Then I moved to the security panel and activated the external camera feed on my phone. I wasn't going to meet them at the door. I was going to watch them first. The sound of tires on the driveway came a few minutes later. I didn't move. I looked down at the screen instead. Alex stepped out first, stretching slightly like he had just come back from something relaxing. Monica followed, composed as always, her posture perfect even after a long flight. Kayla came next, already checking her phone, her attention divided. Vanessa stepped out last. She paused for a second, her eyes scanning the house, observing, not reacting. That caught my attention. She wasn't confused. Not yet. Alex walked up to the front door and reached for the handle. It didn't open. He tried again. A little more force this time. Still nothing. I watched as his expression shifted, subtle at first. Not concern. Just confusion. Behind him, Monica frowned. Did something happen to the lock? She asked. Her tone sharp. Kayla stepped closer, glancing at the keypad. That's new, she said quietly. Alex knocked. Once, then again, louder. Allison. I didn't answer. I kept watching. He pulled out his phone and called me. The screen in front of me lit up with his name. I let it ring. Behind him, Kayla crossed her arms, her posture tightening. This isn't normal, she said. No, it wasn't. And that was the point. Alex tried the handle again, this time with frustration creeping into the movement. Why isn't it opening? Monica's voice sharpened. Call her again. He did. I ignored it again. From the camera angle, I could see the shift happening. Not all at once, but enough. Control doesn't disappear in a single moment. It fractures. Small cracks. Then larger ones. Vanessa stepped slightly to the side, her gaze moving from the door to the windows. Then back to Alex. She wasn't panicking. She was calculating. That made her different from the others. That made her dangerous. Kayla walked a few steps back, scanning the exterior. Something's off, she said, her voice lower now. Alex stopped knocking. For the first time, he just stood there, silent, thinking. I watched his posture change. Less certainty. More awareness. Good. Let him feel it. Let all of them feel it. The absence. The shift. The lack of access. They had walked away like I didn't exist. Now they were standing outside like they didn't belong. A police car passed slowly at the end of the street. Not stopping. Not interfering. Just there. Just visible. Monica noticed it immediately. Her shoulders stiffened. They're watching, she muttered. Kayla turned her head quickly. Who? Monica didn't answer. She didn't need to. Uncertainty does more damage than explanation. Alex ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. This is ridiculous. But his voice didn't carry the same confidence anymore. It was thinner, less certain. He looked at his phone again, then back at the door, and for a brief second, he hesitated. That was the moment. The exact moment he realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a delay. This wasn't something he could control. I stepped away from the screen and walked toward the front door. Slowly. Deliberately. Each step measured. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. Because timing matters. Presence matters. And right now, they needed to feel both. I stopped just before the door, my hand hovering near the handle. On the other side, they were quiet now. No knocking. No voices. Just waiting. For the first time since I had known them, they didn't know what to do. I let the silence sit there for a second longer. Then another. Then I reached for the handle. They thought they were coming home. Back to something familiar. Something they understood. But they weren't. They had already stepped into something else. And there was no way out. I turned the lock. I opened the door slowly. No rush. No hesitation. Just enough to let the moment stretch. Alex stood directly in front of me. His expression caught somewhere between irritation and confusion. Monica was just behind him, her posture still composed. But her eyes sharper now. Kayla stood slightly to the side, watching everything too carefully. Vanessa didn't move. She just looked at me. And in that look, I saw it. Recognition. Not of who I was, but of what this was. I stepped back slightly, giving them space to enter. "Come in," I said. My voice was calm, even controlled. They hesitated for a fraction of a second before stepping inside. That hesitation mattered, because it meant they felt it. The shift. The difference. Alex walked in first, scanning the room quickly. "What's going on?" he asked. Not aggressively. Not yet. Just uncertain. I closed the door behind them without answering. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed louder than it should have. No one spoke for a second. Then Monica broke the silence. "Why were we locked out?" she demanded. I didn't look at her. I walked past them slowly and into the living room, knowing they would follow. And they did. Because they didn't have control anymore. Not of the space. Not of the situation. Not of me. I stopped near the center of the room and turned to face them. They looked different now. Not like a unit. Not like a family. Like 4 individuals trying to understand something they hadn't prepared for. Alex stepped forward. "Allison, what is this?" he asked. Still trying to take control. Still trying to define the moment. I held his gaze. "You tell me," I said. He frowned slightly. "What?" I didn't raise my voice. Didn't change my tone. I simply reached over to the table and picked up a folder. Then another. And another. I placed them down in front of him. One by one. Neatly. Deliberately. "What is that?" Kayla asked. Her voice tighter now. "Take a look," I said. Alex hesitated for a second before opening the first folder. His eyes moved quickly across the page. Then slowed. Then stopped. I watched the exact moment it registered. The booking confirmations. The travel details. The names. All of them, including hers. Vanessa shifted slightly behind him. Not forward. Not back. Just enough to show she was paying attention. Alex closed the folder too quickly. "This doesn't mean anything," he said. Too fast. Too defensive. I tilted my head slightly. "Doesn't it?" He opened his mouth to respond. But I didn't give him the chance. I slid the next folder toward him. Emails. Messages. Conversations. Unfiltered. Unedited. Complete. He didn't open it right away. Which told me everything. Monica stepped closer. "What is she talking about?" she asked. Her voice sharp again. I looked at her then. For the first time since they walked in. "You tell me," I repeated. Kayla reached for the folder before Alex could stop her. She flipped it open. Her expression changed immediately. Not shock. Recognition. Calculation. She knew what she was looking at. She started, then stopped. I watched her carefully. "You want to finish that?" I asked. She closed the folder slowly. "This isn't what you think," she said. I almost smiled. Of course it wasn't. Because what I thought was based on assumptions, what I knew, was based on evidence. I reached for another document. This one thinner, cleaner, more precise. Financial records, transfers, accounts, patterns. Alex took a step back this time. "What is this?" he asked, his voice no longer steady. "You tell me," I said again. His jaw tightened. "That's just business." "Is it?" I asked. I stepped forward slightly, closing the distance just enough to shift the balance. "Because it looks like money being moved quietly, repeatedly, to places it shouldn't be." He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Kayla's eyes moved quickly between the pages, processing, calculating, looking for a way out. There wasn't one. Monica tried again. "This is inappropriate," she said. "You don't just accuse people." "I'm not accusing anyone," I interrupted. Still calm, still controlled. "I'm showing you what you did." That stopped her. Not completely, but enough. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice quieter than the others. "You've been going through his things." I looked at her. Directly. Yes. No hesitation. No apology. She held my gaze for a second longer than expected, then looked away. That told me everything I needed to know. She understood. She knew how far this had gone. Alex ran a hand through his hair again, pacing slightly now. "This is insane," he said. "You're overreacting." There it was. The last attempt. Reframe the situation. Make me the problem. Make me unstable. I let him finish. Let the words settle in the room. Then I stepped forward again. Slowly. Deliberately. "You didn't just lie to me," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You built something behind my back. You moved money. You created documents. You planned everything." I paused, letting the silence do its work. "You didn't just betray me," I added. "You built a system to erase me." No one spoke. Not Alex, not Monica, not Kayla, not even Vanessa. Because there was nothing left to say. The structure they built was already collapsing, and they could feel it. Now they weren't deciding what to do. They were waiting for me to decide what would happen next. He tried to take control again. It was instinct. Desperation disguised as confidence. "This is out of context," Alex said, his voice tightening just enough to give him away. "You're piecing things together that don't mean what you think they mean." I didn't respond. I let him keep talking. Because the more he spoke, the more he revealed. "You went through private files," he added. "That's a violation. You don't even know what you're looking at." I tilted my head slightly, watching him. He was still trying to shift the ground beneath me, still trying to rewrite the situation. Monica stepped in, her tone smoother. "Allison, you're clearly upset," she said. "And that's understandable. But jumping to conclusions like this." "Conclusion," I repeated quietly. She didn't flinch. It's easy to misunderstand things when emotions are involved. There it was. The script, the version of me they had written. Emotional, unstable, unreliable. Kayla crossed her arms, stepping forward slightly. "If you're going to make accusations like this," she said, "you need to think about how this looks. Legally." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. They weren't defending themselves. They were trying to reposition me. Again, I let the silence stretch. Long enough to make them uncomfortable. Long enough to make them feel it. Vanessa was the first to shift. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said quietly. All three of them looked at her. That was the crack. The first real one. Alex's head snapped toward her. "What are you doing?" he hissed under his breath. She didn't answer him. She looked at me. Not with confidence. Not with control. With calculation. "I didn't know everything," she said. "I was told." "That's enough." Alex cut in sharply. Too late. I had already seen it. She wasn't loyal. She was opportunistic. And now, she was afraid. Good. Fear reveals truth faster than pressure ever could. I stepped forward, just enough to shift the space again. "You're right," I said calmly. All of them looked at me. I don't know everything. I let that hang there for a second. Then I continued. "I know enough." I reached down and picked up another folder. Thinner. Cleaner. More precise. I placed it on the table in front of them. Forged signatures. I said. Kayla's eyes flicked to the document immediately. Then away. Too fast. Financial transfers. I added. Tapping the next page. Alex didn't move. Didn't reach for it. Didn't deny it. Recorded conversations. I finished. Now Monica's composure cracked. Just slightly, but enough. "You recorded us?" she asked. "No," I said. I didn't have to. That was the truth. They had done all the work for me. All I had to do was collect it. The room went quiet again. Heavier this time. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. Realization. They understood now. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't something they could talk their way out of. This was complete. And then I said it. The one thing they hadn't prepared for. I didn't just find out. I said. My voice steady. Controlled. I've known for days. Silence. Not the kind that fills space. The kind that empties it. Alex stared at me like he was trying to process something that didn't fit. "What?" he said finally. I didn't look away. "I found everything before you left," I said. I watched the moment it hit him. Not all at once. But enough. "You knew?" he asked. "Yes. And you didn't say anything?" "No." "Why?" I let a small pause settle between us. Then I answered, "Because I needed time." That was when the fear started. Real fear. Not defensive. Not reactive. Strategic fear. The kind that comes when you realize you're no longer in control. "I let you go," I continued. Every step. Every move. I watched it happen. I turned slightly, looking at each of them in turn. "You thought you were ahead," I said. "You thought you were planning something I couldn't see." I looked back at Alex. "You weren't." Vanessa stepped back slightly. Kayla didn't speak at all. Monica's face had gone still. Alex shook his head once, like he could reject the reality just by refusing it. "That's not possible," he said. "It is," I replied. And it happened. I gestured lightly toward the documents. "Everything you did," I said. "Every transfer. Every message. Every plan." I took a step closer. I was already ahead of it. The structure they had built, the one they trusted, the one they believed would protect them, was gone. Not damaged. Gone. Because it was never theirs to control. Not anymore. They had walked into this thinking they understood the outcome, that they had already decided how it would end. But they hadn't. They had just followed a path, one I had already seen, one I had already redirected. Alex looked at me differently now. Not like a husband. Not like someone trying to control the situation. Like someone trying to understand how he lost it. "You set this up," he said quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was already in front of him. In every document. In every detail. In every move he thought was his. They thought they were planning my ending. But from the moment I found that file, they had been walking straight into theirs. No one spoke first. They couldn't, because there was nothing left to argue. Everything that needed to be said was already sitting on the table in front of them. Every lie, every plan, every move they thought would never be seen. Exposed. Complete. I let the silence stay there for a moment longer. Then I reached for the final set of documents. Clean. Organized. Final. "This is how this ends," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I placed the papers in front of Alex. He didn't touch them right away. 2 options. I continued. I could feel all of them watching me now. Not with control. Not with certainty. With attention. Real attention. The first one, I said, tapping lightly on the stack.
We go to court.
I looked directly at him. We present everything. The fraud. The transfers. The documents you signed that weren't yours to sign. I shifted my gaze slightly. The conversations. The plan. No one moved. No one interrupted. You lose everything. I said simply, not just this house. Not just the money. I paused. Your career. Your reputation. Everything you built. Alex's jaw tightened. But he didn't speak. Because he knew. He had already seen enough to understand that I wasn't bluffing. I let the words settle before continuing. Or, I said, sliding the second set of papers forward. You sign. He looked down this time. Slowly. Carefully. What is that? He asked. Though he already knew. Divorce. I said. Terms already prepared? I stepped back slightly, giving him space. You walk away. I continued. No fight. No claims. No access to anything tied to me. I let my gaze move across the room. Not the house. Not the accounts. Not the business. I looked at him again. And you don't come back. Silence. Thicker now. He picked up the papers. Flipped through them. Page by page. His hands weren't steady anymore. Not like before. This is insane, he said. But there was no strength behind it. No, I replied. It's simple. Monica stepped forward suddenly. You can't just dictate terms like this. She snapped. I turned my head slowly toward her. I just did. She opened her mouth again. But nothing came out. Because she understood something now that she hadn't before. Control doesn't come from volume. It comes from position. And she didn't have it anymore. Kayla stayed quiet. Completely. For the first time since I had known her. Because she understood the legal side of this. Better than anyone else in the room. And she knew exactly how bad it was. Vanessa shifted near the doorway. Not closer. Not further away. Just preparing to leave? She didn't belong here anymore. Not in this version of the story. Alex flipped the last page and stopped. The signature line. Waiting. He stared at it for a long moment. Then looked up at me. You planned this, he said. I didn't answer. Because the answer didn't matter. What mattered was what he did next. You'd really do it, he asked. Take everything to court. I held his gaze. Yes. No hesitation. No doubt. Just truth. Something in him broke then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Completely. The version of him that believed he could control this disappeared. He looked back down at the paper, picked up the pen, and for a second, his hand hovered, like he was waiting for something. A reason. A way out. There wasn't one. The pen touched the paper, and with a single movement, it ended. The sound was small, barely audible, but it changed everything. He signed. He set the pen down slowly, didn't look at me again, didn't say anything else, because there was nothing left to say. Monica turned away first, her posture still straight, but empty now. Kayla followed, silent, careful. Vanessa didn't say goodbye. She just left. And Alex? He stood there for a moment longer, then walked past me. Without a word, without a glance. The door opened, then closed. And just like that, they were gone. I stood there in the middle of the room, listening to the silence settle back in. But this time, it felt different. Not heavy, not tense. Clear. I walked slowly through the house, past the spaces that used to feel shared, past the places that once held something that no longer existed, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was losing anything. I felt like I had finally stopped holding on to something that was already gone. I stopped in front of the window, looking out at the city again. Everything still moving. Still the same. But I wasn't the woman who didn't question, who didn't see, who didn't act. I wasn't the one left behind. I was the one who stayed long enough to understand everything, and then walked away with control. They thought I lost everything. But the truth is, I was the only one who didn't lose myself. And if you've ever been in a place where someone made you feel invisible, replaceable, like you didn't matter, I want you to remember something. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes, it's just preparation. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have confronted them right away? Or would you have waited and taken everything back? If this story made you feel something, if it stayed with you even for a moment, make sure you stay here too. There are more stories like this, and some of them change everything. I wasn't the one who got left behind. I was the one who chose to leave last. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.